Welcome to Tales of Hope, where every paw print counts. Animal tie in the house, spreading love, hear the sounds. Every week animal stories, rights and welfare in the mix. Step up, take action, we're giving animals a fix. Tales of Hope, raise your voice, make some noise. Change the game for every animal, girl and boy. One world, one fight, let's turn the page. A future for the voiceless, bring hope to center stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all of you. Today, we have a very excellent person on our show tonight. We have Professor Andrew Knight, all the way from UK. He holds a double doctorate, one in vegan pet food and the other critiquing the scientific and educational animal use. And apart from that, he is a professor at Murdoch University for veterinary things. And apart from that, he is also a professor for other two universities, one in UK and another one in Australia. Professor Knight, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Please. Now, can we understand from our viewers' perspective, why did you get into this field?
I was always interested in the potential of plant-based diets to lower the number of animals being killed in the food system and also to improve the environmental impacts of food production. And because nowadays I think that climate change and environmental degradation and biodiversity loss are becoming such huge and important issues, I think that all of us with a choice have a responsibility to start looking at our own lifestyles and see what we can do to have a positive impact on these existential problems. So I have done that, and I had switched to an entirely plant-based diet myself many years ago. As a veterinarian in small animal practice treating dogs and cats, I was interested in knowing whether dogs and cats could also be maintained healthily on vegan diets and other sustainable diets, because there are so many dogs and cats and they consume collectively a lot of meat, so their diets have a big impact. I didn't get the opportunity to seriously look into this until 2020, when I secured a research grant that enabled me to start doing what effectively became a PhD looking at vegan and sustainable pet foods. And that's when I started studying the issue in depth, and the findings turned out to be hugely exciting.
Well, we would love to understand as we progress, if you could, if you could share us with the findings, because I think most of pet parents have across the globe, if I'm not mistaken, have this notion that without the meat diet, the animal, your pets are not going to have a healthy life.
This is understandable because we think of dogs and cats as being carnivores.
Yes.
And we would naturally assume therefore that they require meat within their diets and they would be unhealthy if they don't receive it. The truth is more nuanced than that. Dogs are no longer obligate carnivores, they're now omnivores. They've been co-evolving with our ancestors for 20 to 40,000 years and following our ancestors around the landscape as we hunted and gathered. Most of our ancestors' diets were actually not meat, they were actually starchy root vegetables. There were wolves who followed our ancestors around the landscape looking for scraps from the kills that our ancestors made of game animals. Some of those wolves were more confident and had better temperaments and would approach more closely to our human campfires and start to receive food scraps. They started to collaborate with our ancestors and join their hunting parties, and so they were tolerated to stay with our ancestors. Some of those wolves had genetic mutations that enabled them to get some nutritional benefit from the much more varied diet of human food scraps around those campfires, and most of those food scraps were not meat, they were actually starchy root vegetables. The wolf hybrids that had these mutations did better than the wolves that didn't, and over time the population changed from carnivores to omnivores. So, domesticated dogs have got the ability to derive nutritional benefit from a mixed diet of human food scraps, mostly consisting of starchy foods. Cats have had a different role. They remain very much carnivores. They've been around for only 8 to 10,000 years, and their role has been to protect our food stores, particularly grain stores, from rodents. So they've been tolerated and encouraged for this reason. They haven't been consuming human food scraps and haven't turned into omnivores, so they remain biologically carnivorous. Now, might be interesting, but it's not relevant to modern domesticated dogs and cats, both of who consume body parts from animals they'd never naturally hunt, such as cows, pigs, fish, chicken, with many unnatural additives. A lot of plant materials too. Meat-based pet food is nearly 50% plant material normally in dry kibble. And then fed at predictable times each day. This bears very little resemblance to the natural feeding regime of an ancestral dog or cat. What dogs and cats need biologically is a certain set of nutrients, and provided that diets are formulated to include all of the necessary nutrients for dogs and for cats in the right proportions, then we would expect the animals to do well on those diets. The really exciting thing is that when you take something like a commercial meat-based diet, which is nearly 50% plants anyway, with lots of supplemental vitamins, minerals, and other supplements, that's a normal meat-based diet, and usually they're dry kibble, sometimes they're wet diets. If you take that and you remove the meat and the animal products and you replace it with more plant-based materials, but you still have supplements included, then you end up with a diet which fulfills all the animal's nutritional needs, eliminates certain dietary hazards. The most common one is animal-sourced allergens. So you get certain health benefits in animals that have dietary sensitivities or allergies. And you eliminate the killing of billions of animals within the food system. And you create massive environmental benefits as well. The studies that I've been involved in since 2020 have calculated what those environmental benefits are, how big those benefits are, and how many of these animals would no longer need to be killed in the food system. And also some other exciting things, such as how many additional people could you feed with the food energy savings if the world's dogs and cats were transitioned onto vegan diets. I could tell you the savings, and they're quite massive.
I do trust you, but this has been a very enlightening session for me, honestly, from what I've heard. I would highly appreciate if it is convenient for you, if you could share, these findings with us, which when we release the podcast, we can do it as an addendum to all that for the viewers and for the listeners. It would be really helpful if that's convenient with you.
That's great. I can summarize some of the key results right now. I published a major study in 2023 in one of the world's leading general science journals, which is called PLOS ONE. And the most important thing is this simple summary. There's a graphical summary of the key results, which you can get under the comments section in the scientific article, which is freely available on the internet.
Perfect.
And it shows what the benefits are. And basically, in 2018, I calculated that there were about 471 million pet dogs and 373 million pet cats in the world. And
Wow.
there were 78 billion land animals killed in the food system. Today, by the way, it's more than 92 billion, so the numbers have gone up. But even back in 2018, there were 7 billion animals being killed to feed dogs and cats. That's land animals. And that was about 9% of the global total. The rest were being killed to feed humans. In countries of high pet ownership, such as the US and European nations, it's 20% of animals are probably being killed to feed dogs and cats, not humans. But globally, it's about 9%. If all the world's dogs, the pet dogs, and I'm not talking about the stray dogs and dogs in animal shelters, just pet dogs in people's homes, if they were all to transition onto a nutritionally sound vegan diet, it would free up 1.5 times the greenhouse gases produced by the United Kingdom and enough food energy to feed 450 million additional people, which is bigger than the whole of Europe. So there are staggering environmental benefits. There'll be vast savings of land and fresh water as well. So These are huge. There are also potentially some health benefits. There have been 11 studies looking at health outcomes in dogs, which have demonstrated equivalent or superior outcomes when vegan or vegetarian diets are used, usually vegan. One study with a contrary result, but that's the oldest, smallest, least realistic study. There have been 3 studies showing benefits in cats and 0 studies showing a contrary result. So the benefits are kind of what you would expect. If you design a diet for a dog or a cat which fulfills all its nutritional needs, but eliminates certain dietary hazards, you would expect to have health outcomes as good or better. Across the studies, there are a couple of benefits that seem to be arising consistently. One seems to be associated with not consuming animal-sourced allergens in the diet, because in a dog's diet, well, for dogs, about 80% of allergens are within the diet, and about 20% are not dietary. They're in the surrounding environment. And the most common allergens are actually animal-sourced allergens. So when you take those out of the diets, then you are likely to see reduction in gastrointestinal problems, itchy skin, and itchy ear canals. These are very common problems actually in dogs, and that's exactly what the studies show. They show that dogs that are on vegan diets have reductions in those problems consistently, and they impact quality of life.
Wow.
There was another study that showed that dogs on vegan diets were living 1.5 years longer on average, and this was a difference that was statistically significant, so almost certainly not random biological variation, but a true difference. That equates to a human living just over 10 more years. So it's pretty exciting to think of what it would mean to any of us if we could have an extra 10 years of life, and on top of that, have an improved quality of life because of a reduction in things that impact quality of life, itchy skin, ear canals, gastrointestinal problems. The second cluster of benefits is reduction in being overweight and obese, improved mobility, reduction in musculoskeletal problems. So these are the consistent benefits across the studies. They're very important for dogs and cats, but they're even more important when you consider the impacts on the environment, greenhouse gases, the number of animals killed in the food system. As I said, at least 7 billion land animals were being killed each year just to feed dogs and cats. They would all be spared from death. So there are enormous potential benefits, and that's why I'm involved in this field. I think it's the most potentially beneficial field in the entire environmental and animal welfare movement, and also the most neglected, because we've long known about the importance of plant-based diets for people for similar reasons, but there are hundreds of people around the world working in that area. The number of people around the world working in the area of plant-based and sustainable diets for dogs and cats has pretty much been myself, a small group of my collaborators, a veterinarian also in Canada and her research team, companies preparing new vegan pet diets and cultivated meat-based pet diets, and that's it globally. So it's a tiny number of people working on an issue that has potential to bring absolutely game-changing, huge, massive benefits. So as I say, that's why I'm involved. It's the most potentially beneficial, neglected field, I think, within the entire environmental and animal advocacy movement.
Well, that I would agree with you. You know, it's one of the most neglected in the ecosystem. Now, moving forward, looking back, was there a particular moment or influence in your life that drew you into the field of sustainable pet nutrition?
As I say, I think it was in 2020 when I managed to get an external research grant. I was an academic at a university teaching animal welfare at the University of Winchester, where we had established 3 degrees in animal welfare. And academics spend most of their time marking, doing administration, fixing problems that shouldn't exist because universities are not functioning properly, and a little bit of time teaching. There's very little time to do anything else. So the only way to do serious research is to get grants, to hire other colleagues to do your main work so that you can free up some time to do a research show. So that happened for me in 2020. And I finally got some time to start doing some serious research. And I published a series of studies looking at aspects such as health outcomes and environmental benefits, and also palatability, how much animals enjoy their different diets, which led to a PhD in vegan and sustainable pet food. So yeah, that was my big breakthrough moment, was in 2020 when I finally was able to get some funding that enabled me to do the research, which then opened up this whole field.
Oh, interesting. But I tell you, with the numbers that you've mentioned, we should be thankful for you, because there are some people who are looking into it. Honestly, with the numbers that you gave me, I was absolutely in shock, sort of thing.
Yes, there is so little awareness, and it's because nearly all of the research in this area has only been published since 2021. And most of the vegan pet foods have been created very recently. So we now have an answer to this problem, and we have the research to prove it. But 99% of the pet owning world doesn't know about it yet because it's
Yeah.
so new.
Yes, absolutely. Because I'll tell you what, I have three dogs at my place, and I remember when we got the first one, and we took him to the vet. That's like his godmother, because she delivered him, and because I have been a vegetarian for almost 35 plus years of my life. I'm not a vegan as yet. I'm a vegetarian. But when we got him, before we got him home, I wanted to, me and my wife, we were discussing about vegetarian and how we're going to keep it. And our first visit to the vet itself, and we were like, no, you can't, give him vegetarian or vegan diet. He is a carnivore. He needs to be given meat. And listening to you now, I look at the 4 years that have gone back. I wish we would have met earlier, but I think, everything is destined for, I believe. So for me, I mean, okay, now we feed them, the meat-based diet. We cook at home and everything. More than the only dry kibble that we give them is only in the morning for the breakfast. That is also only for my elder one. But most of the time, we cook food for them with veggies, with a lot of veggies and a lot, of fish, and at times chicken, depend on what they want to eat. But yes, I'll be very honest. Listening to you, I am definitely going to discuss it with my wife, and switch him to all our three kids to vegan diet. I really want to do that.
Fantastic. I have advice on my website, sustainablepetfood.info, about choosing a diet. I encourage people to try to ensure that the diet is nutritionally sound. So checking the labeling, making sure that it says on the labeling, this is a nutritionally complete diet, not just one that's intended as a treat or a snack, but is a complete diet. And secondly, comes from a reputable pet food company that hopefully should be working with veterinary nutritionists or other nutritional specialists, and can provide some basic information about what they've done to ensure a diet is nutritionally sound. They might say that they've formulated the diet to meet the requirements of authorities to ensure that recommended nutrient levels are included. They might say they've done feeding trials, but there should be some kind of basic information. If they can't provide any and they won't answer questions, that should be a warning sign, and you should consider a different company. So I've got advice about that on my website, sustainablepetfood.info, as well as advice about how to transition dogs and cats onto new diets, onto vegan diets in particular.
That would be nice. It would be nice even for our listeners to, check it out and, think twice before they feed their pets, with the meat-based diet that we've been doing for years.
Yeah, and what you've said about your veterinarian is very familiar. People have been making diets at home for a long time and feeding them to animals, and there are fads such as the popularity of raw meat diets recently. And usually these diets are nutritionally unsound. There have been quite a lot of studies that have looked at homemade and raw meat diets. So veterinarians are naturally skeptical of anything that they think might be something other than a good commercial diet produced by a modern pet food company. But what vets don't know is that there recently have been developed in the last few years a whole host of new vegan diets and other sustainable diets by modern pet food companies, making sure that they're nutritionally sound. And there's a body of evidence now published in scientific journals showing the good health outcomes, good environmental outcomes, palatability and so on. Vets usually don't know this because most of this has occurred since 2021 and vets are not up to date. Where I am in the United Kingdom, there's pretty good awareness amongst vets because I've had a series of articles and letters published in the main veterinary journals. There's been quite a lot of media publicity. There was a debate between a veterinarian who was quite ignorant and myself, which was very amusing, which was read by many veterinarians in the United Kingdom, and this was just recently. And because it was amusing, they read it, but they also learnt the key facts about the issue. So there is good awareness amongst vets in the UK about this issue. The British Veterinary Association last year decided to reverse its opposition, and they now support the use of vegan diets for dogs, providing they're nutritionally sound. But in other countries, this hasn't occurred yet. There hasn't been much communication. People are generally unaware. They're making wrong assumptions. They're assuming that people feeding vegan diets are usually creating their own diets at home, and they're skeptical of these because they're usually nutritionally unsound. That's no longer modern reality. Modern reality is that most people feeding vegan diets are now buying them online from commercial companies that have formulated them to be nutritionally sound. So vets are simply not up to date, and that's not acceptable. Veterinarians are seen as experts, and they're giving professional advice which affect many people's lives and the lives of their animals. They have a professional responsibility to be up to date on any important matters on which they're giving advice, and it's hard to think of a more impactful issue than diet, which is being fed to animals on a daily basis. So vets do have a responsibility to learn about changes in this field and to ensure their knowledge is up to date. And that's the point I made to the British Veterinary Association, which resulted in them actually setting up a committee to examine this issue and then producing a report and reversing their previous opposition and deciding to now support vegan pet food diets. So vets in other countries should be doing the same thing.
I would seriously like to advocate for it, if I can do my bit, because this is something which needs to be done and taken at a strong footing,
Absolutely. And if you have any opportunity to find veterinary associations in your country and either give them information directly or provide me with an opportunity to speak to them, that's exactly the kind of thing that would be really helpful.
I'll discuss that with you after the show.
Or any of your listeners for that matter as well.
We would discuss that in detail. Now, moving forward, what percentage of pet guardians are interested in alternates to meat-based diet? Given the percentage of pet parents, because as you rightly mentioned, we are most of us are very unaware.
There have been 2 large-scale studies that have asked pet guardians whether they would be interested in alternatives to conventional meat and raw meat diets. One was 3,600 pet guardians, primarily in North America, and then we did the same thing with more than 4,000 pet guardians, primarily in the UK, Europe. North Americans, that was 35% were interested, and we found that 46% were interested. So somewhere between 35 and 46% of pet guardians seem realistically willing to choose alternatives. The most popular alternative was cultivated meat based pet foods. These do exist now. This was the world's first. It was launched in February in the United Kingdom by a company called Meatly in combination with the pack. And this is cultivated chicken included within dog kibble. These are treats. This is Friends and Family. They have been working on a cultivated ocean fish for use in cat treats, and they've just gotten approval to market a cultivated chicken pet food in Singapore, which is great news. So the most popular choice was cultivated meat, but with those exceptions, it doesn't exist yet anywhere in the world, and it's really hard to get. This one is probably around about sold out. The others haven't appeared yet. So where does that leave us? The next most popular choice was vegan diets, and there are many of those now. There are 4 companies in the United Kingdom set up by vets who have created vegan pet foods. The biggest one is called Omni, and there are many companies that are not created by vets. So you can get many different sort of vegan pet foods available via the internet. And that was the second most popular choice. And so most of my research is focused on these because they're kind of widely available online. A third choice has been microbial protein-based pet food, also launched in February in the United Kingdom. This came from Germany. It's now available in the UK as well, and the Germans may be shipping internationally, I'm not sure. And what has happened here is that the company has been fermenting a microorganism, a harmless microorganism that just basically grows protein in giant steel cylinders that take up very little land, very little water, and offcuts from cane sugar production at a place in China where a lot of cane sugar is grown. So those are the inputs, and the outputs is just protein powder, which can be directly put into this kibble. So this is probably the most efficient way to produce food, almost no land, water or inputs, and protein directly. So I'm sure that will have a very bright future in the future of food production for humans and animals in an increasingly crowded world with increasing competition for protein sources. So yeah, these are the options now. The most popular choice was the cultivated meat, but hardly exists, followed by vegetarian and vegan diets, and these are relatively widely available.
Well, I think in India we still don't have that many brands available with the vegan diets, but it surely looks like the way forward. I mean, if we want to be environmentally, I would say ethically correct for the environment as well as for the animals, I think this would be the best way forward.
Look, India is so important as the world's most populous nation with a growing population. There are 270 million dogs and cats already within Asia, and that's projected to increase 30% in the next 10 years. Pet ownership's rapidly growing in Asia. So that's probably the fastest growing region of the world, large region of the world. So all of those dogs and cats are going to have a really big impact in terms of numbers of food animals that are killed to feed them, in terms of the greenhouse gases and land and water and so on that are being produced and consumed. So it would be fantastic if pet food manufacturers in India could recognise the huge potential to do good by supplying these diets in India. And also I would expect that they would be marketing to a relatively sympathetic audience, because the tradition of vegetarianism is so strong in India compared to most other regions of the world. Vegan pet food, the sector is growing at 6% per year, 7.8% per year, which is faster than the rest of the pet food sector, which is great, but that's not uniform. In India, it's growing more like 30% per year, actually. So there's a much quicker rate of growth compared to other regions of the world, and I would expect that's because there is more appeal to consumers in India for vegetarian products than there are in the world, broadly speaking. So I do hope that the sector, the pet food sector, will pour resources into this area in India and increase the availability of products, because it seems a really important and obvious region to be marketing these products to.
Looking at this, you said India is a market where people are vegetarian. I mean, yes, vegetarianism is big because of religion and spirituality, but yes, we do have a big population which is also a meat eater, depending on which part of the country you are in, depending. But yes, given the current situation that we are in, and if we want to be living ethically correct to correct to the animals and to the environment, I think we need to switch. I mean, given most of the spiritual leaders, if you would see, or spiritual gurus, they do talk about it. You know, be vegetarian, stop killing, and protect your environment. Because most of the leaders and gurus, they have had this. They've been doing in India for centuries. But I think the most important problem or lies with us humans. We think, what we do is right. I mean, I don't know how to put it across, but that's the way it is, because we humans are the main problem.
Yeah, the world is changing in some really important ways. Since I was born in 1970, the majority of wild animal populations on the planet have been wiped out. They've disappeared during my own lifetime. We've now, in the last decade, climate change has become a really big concern and is only going to get bigger in the future. That's starting to really impact people living in certain regions of the world, hot regions of the world. We've got a growing population. There's mass changes in consumerism, particularly in Asia, as developing nations, particularly China, seek to consume a much higher proportion of animal produce. So farmed animal numbers are sharply rising. So the world is changing, and it's not difficult to work out the best way to live for anyone that wishes to open their eyes and see. And the spiritual leaders are right. It's incumbent on all of us to do the best we can in our different circumstances, and to find the ways to live with the least harmful impact and to try to do the most good. And for those who have the option, that's virtually everybody, that means a plant-based diet, actually. But what I'm pointing out is that we always thought that it was okay to stop there. It's not okay to stop there. We also need to extend that to our dogs and cats, especially our dogs. If we have dogs, we know from some studies that medium-sized dogs consume as much meat on average as the average person, in studies where this has been done. So if you switch your own diet, but you have 3 dogs and you ignore those, then you're missing the biggest contributor to the problem, which is actually the dogs, not yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, as I said, I've been a vegetarian for almost 35 plus years, but yes, deep inside, because of the spirituality that I follow, I've always had this pain. But given with my partner, and what the vet said, was like, no, you need to. So for us, yes, it is painful. And what you rightly mentioned during our conversation, the skin issues, the allergies, and I see that very often with my elder one, and we need to, almost every month, we need to take him to the vet.
Yes, it's a really common problem. Some of the most common health problems in dogs are being overweight and obese, having mobility restrictions, having gastrointestinal problems, itchy skin, itchy ear canals. All of these reduce with vegan and vegetarian diets consistently across multiple studies. There are reductions in all those problems when dogs are switched to vegan diets. So it's a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Now, can I ask you, I mean, since we're talking about this, in terms of pets, do pets really enjoy the plant-based diet? Because I remember you mentioning that you've done research and there's been surveys as well. So I need to understand, I mean, for our listeners and for everybody, do they really enjoy that meal?
Yep. I mean, some people claim that it's cruel to feed these supposed carnivores vegan diets. Other people point out that meat-based diets are nothing like the natural diets of ancestral dogs and cats, and that animals such as cats that drink milk seem to enjoy things that are unnatural to them. But I think more productive than people arguing back and forth amongst themselves is, why don't we ask the animals what they think? And how do we do that? Well, as scientists, we do it by studying their behaviour at feeding times. So these are palatability studies. So what I did was I trawled through the scientific literature to find every behavioural indicator of palatability, of how much animals were enjoying their food. And I added some more from my own experiences as a veterinarian. We came up with 10 indicators in dogs and 15 in cats. And they're things like, does your dog race up to the food bowl? Does it jump up and down? Does it bark, salivate, guard its food? With cats, there's lots of sniffing and licking and twitching of ears and tails and things like that, whiskers. So there were 15 of these behavioural signs in cats, and we studied more than 1,100 cats. And there were 10 indicators in dogs, and we studied more than 2,300 dogs. So these are the biggest studies that have been done in this field. And we found that on average, there was no significant difference between dogs and cats fed vegan diets and meat-based diets in whether they were likely to display behavioural signs of enjoying their food or disliking their food. There were a couple of minor differences in individual things. For example, dogs fed vegan diets. There was an indicator that they might have been enjoying those more than conventional meat-based diets. But overall, there was, on average, there was no significant difference. So individual animals have personalities and preferences and may have likes and dislikes. But when you look at large numbers, populations, and get averages, you find that there's no significant difference. Our results, we published that also in PLOS One in 2021. That was the biggest study in the field, but there have been some other smaller ones as well previously, which have had the same results. So people can make claims that it's cruel to feed these carnivores vegan diets, but it's contrary to the evidence in the field. There's no evidence whatsoever to support that.
It's such a good thing that you mentioned, that because in India, I mean, I'll be honest, if you see on social media, there are a lot of people, who talk about, because as we said, in India, there is a lot of people who are vegetarian, and you won't believe it. It's, such a mess. Everybody keeps cursing each other. You're being cruel to your animal. You don't know. And given what you've just mentioned with the studies that you've done, 2,300 dogs and 1,100 cats, that's a big number. It's not a small number, to be honest. And given that you have it, it's like a scientific proof. So I think, what you've rightly done is we just need to create an awareness amongst the people that how important it is. And during a conversation, I remember you mentioned that even you increase 1.5 year of lifespan of these dogs, So, I mean, as compared to humans, you said, which is 10 years. But given that is so important, if we could just have this scientific proof, where it's available to people to see instead of just, pointing fingers and saying the other person is cruel.
That's cruel right. There is now evidence covering the top concerns that people say they have. We've done these huge surveys of thousands of pet guardians, and we've worked out what the top concerns are. And we know that when they're considering vegan diets, firstly, they want to be reassured about pet health outcomes and make sure the health of the pets won't suffer, that the diets are nutritionally sound and of good quality, that their animals will enjoy eating them, and that they will have environmental benefits. So we now have the evidence, and these are peer-reviewed scientific studies published in some of the world's top general science journals. They're all open access, so they're freely available on the internet. We have the studies to satisfy all of these areas, but people usually don't know about them yet, because 99% of pet owning world is unaware, because this has just occurred in the last 3 or 4 years. So that's why your podcast is so important, to help bring this information to your audiences, because there's been almost no communication of this information to pet guardians in India, or indeed in most regions of the world so far.